Well, today's topic is structured performance, family identity and networks in Chinese hospitals. A little bit background. This is my first autoethnography and my second or rather brand new adventure into medical sociology, but I have a very strong willingness to tell a story. And because this is an autoethnography, some quantitative follow-ups are needed to tell how prevalent the mechanisms are in our research in this project. So this autoethnography is about my mother. She had chronic health issues, including high blood pressure, ever since in her early 20s. In 2016, she had a heart attack developed from high blood pressure. And she did not go for screening because one doctor was opposed all the doctor's opinions for screening. And in November 2017, she was hospitalized with critical condition. But she was not placed in ICU, intensive care unit, but a regular hospital room, which turned out to be lethal to the fatal for her because her roommate was much more healthy than my mother. And my mother contracted the flu from her roommate. So my mother had to leave the hospital for 2 weeks to treat her, for fear of the flu. And she did contract the flu at home and had to be rushed to hospital, Central Hospital in Cebu City for a second time. 2 weeks after she was in home, she left hospital. And she was having lung infection. And several days after being in the hospital, she developed her stomach bleed due to the complications caused by the prescriptions of physicians. So she almost passed for a second time, but she miraculously recovered and was released from hospital in early January 2018. She enjoyed very good health from early January 2018 this year to March 12th, when my grandmother passed away. And my mother began to experience very minor symptoms. So for preventative care, she was sent to hospital. And just within less than 2 hours, she sank into a coma and passed away. So she was 73, and it was 9 days after my grandmother passed away. So that is, that's the whole story. I want to tell the story from a sociological perspective. So my research question is, how did patients' contact with hospitals and medicalization in general impact their health? Sometimes for the worse. So my purpose of doing this research is to connect social relations through social network analysis, culture through identity theory, and institutions through understanding, through the examination of how hospitals in China value certain patients and exploit them. As a result, would impact the patient's family, the patient's health and their family's health and well-being. I use 3 major concepts or paradigms. There are 3 components in the theoretical framework: medicalization, identity theory, social network analysis. For the part on my mother's medical issues, I borrowed Simon's concept of medicalization because I believe this concept is very revealing of the situation my mother was in and my whole family was in. For identity theory, I borrow 2 branches of identity theory concepts. The first one is the structural branch of the identity theory, the definition of the identity as defined by people's social network position, which are internalized individuals. And the most important idea is authenticities, or the likelihood a person would act upon his or her identity. And so in general, this branch of the identity theory stresses the structural impact on identity. And I also borrow the concepts of the perceptual control branch of identity theory because they posit that there's when there's a discrepancy between people's identity meanings and their identity performance in a given situation, of corrective behavior would result. So, for example, if a person believes that he or she is not masculine or feminine enough in a given situation, he or she would become more masculine or more feminine to correct this discrepancy between his or her identity and identity meanings and identity behavior. For the social network part, the most relevant concept is proximity, the idea that when people are close, physically or geographically, they would become, there would be more relationships. I also believe that the content of networks matter. In this context, a lot of positive relationships developed, but a lot of antagonistic relationships also developed as a result of the hospital's manipulations. Sometimes they would present their stuff to the patient. Sometimes they would withhold their stuff from the patients and their family, just to create a very antagonistic network. And the state also intervenes in the creation of networks by defining which family members should be responsible for their parents' health issues. In terms of method, I used discourse analysis. So I actually collected data in 2 time periods. The first time period is from November 25th to December 30th, 2017, and then the second period will be from June 5th to 15th. The first period was really for taking care of my mother in hospitals, and also in between her hospitalizations, I was sent to hospital because from stress and exhaustion, physical exhaustion. And the second part was in June. My mother already passed away in March 21st. But there was a consequence, a physical consequence, and that is I developed back pain from moving from a larger apartment to a smaller apartment, so that I can seek some treatment to prepare for my mother's care in China. So I had to have my aunt asked me to do some physical therapy with her to solve this issue. The findings, there are 4 major findings: family versus family. So that is when families are pitted against each other by the hospitals, when they are placed in the same space without any need to do so, just so that the institutions can get rid of, can exploit patients in critical condition and send them away as soon as possible. So it is for profit and efficiency. The second part is patient versus medicine. That is when physicians do not share, decision makings with patients and their family members, and they would withhold the opinions of the pharmacists from being presented to patients and their family members, so that what they did was just to notify the patients and their families that this was the patient, and the family had no say in the process when the medication is in process. And the third part is about fate versus management. So that is when physicians present disputes among themselves to patients and their families, so that the patients, caught in between the different opinions, would opt for non-action when action is required. And this mechanism really kind of like cultivates chronic patients with chronic health issues into like people with critical conditions that would require a lot of money spent in the hospital. And of course, federalism for the physicians. And the last part is about, are the hospitals almighty for all health issues? And the answer is that probably not so, particularly in terms of when it comes to chronic health issues. So this is the first part, family versus family. In China, it has become a legal code for family members to take care of their sick families. And in my mother's case, these would be my father, my sister, and myself. My aunt was taking care of my mother before I rushed back to China, knowing for the first time in my life ever that my mother was critically sick. And I didn't even have a clue what had happened before that. And then and also my aunt was also taking care of my grandmother, so that made it possible for her to take care of her. And then my brother-in-law was kind of back up from time to time. Honestly, I felt extreme content attending to my mother, but my mother's health was not helped. The whole family's well-being was not helped through our interaction with the hospitals. And so this is just the memo I took, in terms of how the two families, my mother's family, us, and her roommate's family, we are pitted against each other. So this is the first day I was in the hospital, and and you can see that my mother's roommate was much more healthy. And and this is how I found out, like my mother was in critical condition, she couldn't move, and we were treated very, very badly when my mother kind of demonstrated how weak she was by the nurse, the doctor, and her roommates and her roommate. And so so this is when we decided to let my mother leave the hospital because her roommate contracted the flu, and so this is the result of this contact with the roommate. Just 2 weeks after my mother was home, she was sent to hospital and she almost died. The second part is patient versus medicine. It's really about physicians refused to share their authority on medicine. Medicine, of course, cures, and that is why we go to hospitals, right? But physicians' decisions on medications can lead to complications, and that happened the second time my mother was sent to hospital, and so the hope that medicine can help her dampened when her stomach began to bleed the fourth day she was in hospital. And so this is just a description of how this happened. So this is the first day, December 16th, was the first day my mother was sent to hospital. And, there was nothing doctors can do. They just, and there was no hospital bed. And on the 20th, after my mother was transferred from the emergency room, long-term emergency room, to a hospital room, she almost passed because of the stomach bleeding. So it's really it's really professional for the physicians to do this, but they did this. And what do you do? So it's not like they didn't have pharmacists, but the pharmacy presence was not given to the patient and the patient's family. And this is not, I think this is not rare. What this project has added is just that this withholding of the presence of physicians, of pharmacists from the patients, this manipulation of social relationship is in here. And I think I've mentioned fate versus management. This happened to my mother, and it also happened to me. And in my mother's case, they didn't tell my mother she should have the screening by presenting conflicted opinions, while we should have known better as physicians. And this is the case where I was misdiagnosed, but I knew better, and I got treatment myself. This the last section is about, in my mother's case, she really developed this heart attack and blood pressure, high blood pressure. So I mean, in terms of technically, there's 3 mistreatments in the past 2 or 3 years of her life really killed her. The question, a related question, is like, did the decision to trust hospitals solely for her life exacerbate the situation with her? My answer was yes. My aunt was taking care of my grandmother, and they had, my grandmother and mother had similar health issues. But as the daughter of my grandmother, my aunt was able to make major decisions. As my mother's sister, she did not. My aunt did not doubt the significance of hospitals, but she did believe that chronic issues can be better solved by physical therapy. And so this is the process where I went to this physical therapy place with my aunt. And I think you can read the memos from June 5th to June 14th, where my back pain is completely gone. So this is really about how detrimental the medicalization can be for patients and patients' families. As I mentioned, the state defines who takes care of the patient, and the local hospitals interferes through administration by worsening a patient's health situation, because these people are deemed more worthy to be treated, so they are more exploitable. And I have explained the 3 mechanisms how hospitals manipulate social relations to achieve efficiency and profit for the better resume of officials. And as I mentioned, the key here is profit making for the purpose of keeping us job. So the relationship between patients and physicians is really a domination resistance relationship. And I think, by combining the 3 components, social relations, culture, and medicalization, it is more tangible to study this relationship. It's not more there's already literature on the relationship between physicians and patients, and this just adds more mechanisms. And I think this would also add to the literature on the link between identity and social networks. And so I think this catch-22 dilemma encountered by patients and their family members in China has its historical rationale that is beyond the scope of this research, and that can be pursued by future research. And I would think that would be very interesting. Thank you.